With Liquor Barn, you can shop your favorite bourbon, that perfect bottle of wine, or discover something new. To place an order for pickup or delivery, download the Liquor Barn app, visit liquorbarn.com, or call your nearest Liquor Barn location. Follow us on social media and subscribe to our email list for all the latest news on products, promotions, and events. Liquor Barn, where Kentuckians go to celebrate life. Cheers!
Limestone Farms bourbons are like a secret portal to a world of rich flavors where high proof meets smooth satisfaction. Every barrel is meticulously crafted and blended with a specific message in mind. Experience clean delineated flavor profiles that will have you engaged from the first sip to the final drop, making your palate beg for just one more taste. Limestone Farms, bringing heritage home.
Bourbon Life listeners, it's time we all get a little toasted. With Penelope Bourbon's Toasted series, of course. This unique blend is a testament to the power of experimentation. After full maturation in a charred new American oak barrel, their bourbon is finished in a secondhand freshly toasted barrel to create a delicious variety of chars and toasts with deep vanilla and caramel notes. No matter your preference, there's a toasted blend for you. Start your one-of-a-kind experience at penelopebourbon.com. Repeal Oak Fired Steakhouse raises a glass to authenticity on historic Whiskey Row. Housed in the former site of JTS Brown & Sons wholesale warehouse and bottling operations, it's where the family welled up with pride as their labels became staples in bar rooms all over the country. This is why we reclaim history by preparing steaks over the flames of oak-aged barrels. Recognized nationally as one of America's best bourbon bars and the Wine Spectator Best of Award of Excellence, this is the place for those with a taste for experience.
Welcome to the Bourbon Life Podcast, your source for all things bourbon. Join your hosts, Mark and Matt, as they drink and review bourbons, share news about upcoming events, interview the who's who in the bourbon world, and, most importantly, bring you along for the fun of living the bourbon life. Now, here's your hosts, Mark and Matt.
All right, everybody, welcome back for another episode of the Bourbon Life Podcast. I'm your host, Mark, and with me here live tonight in the Bourbon Life studios, it is my good friend, Matt. Matt, how are you doing out there in the green room?
Hey, Mark, I am great out here. Back in front of the camera, in front of the computer, in front of the fireplace, although it's roastingly warm outside for the middle end of May.
Yeah. But, 88 degrees or so,
hey,
right?
Always good to be back. How are you doing there? You just had a big birthday week, right? Birthday princess?
I did, man. I hit the big 5'6". I know I look a lot older now that I'm growing out the scraggly beard and the long hair. I've just given up. I've just determined, I'm like George Costanza. If I could ensconce myself in velvet and just give up, I would do it.
But no, you're sporting your NHL playoffs beard.
You know how big of a fan I am of hockey, Matt. Yeah,
yeah, about as big as everyone else in the state
that.
of Kentucky, from what I remember.
Yeah, well, Matt, you had a big week too, and I know you never like to talk about it, but we're just going to throw it out there because you did your first Ironman race of the season. It was a half Ironman, and you did very well. You came in, sixth place in your age group? Is that right?
Something like that.
Something like that, yeah. Well, congratulations on a great race, man. Well done. Of course, we are the Bourbon Life Podcast presented by Liquor Barn. We appreciate their support. We appreciate the support of all of our sponsors. We could not do the show without their help. So thank you guys for everything that you do for us. And with that said, Matt, would you like to tell everybody who we have? We got a special show tonight. This is going to be a lot of fun. Would you like to tell everybody who we have with us tonight?
I would love to, Mark. And this is enough about your boring hosts here for everybody. Let's get to the exciting guest. We have joining us the author of the book, Dusty Booze, Aaron Goldfarb. Aaron, welcome on to the Bourbon Life Podcast.
Thanks for having me. I watched a half marathon this weekend. I didn't run one, so kind of the same as you. I don't know where I finished in my age group of watching, but I did all right.
Oh yeah, that's what I told my wife earlier. I've been retired from Ironman for 11 years, and I will never ever run again in my life. So that was it. So yeah, but Aaron, thanks for joining us, man. I'm looking forward to this. I've seen you've been on a couple of podcasts here lately, obviously promoting the book, and again, I'll hold it up there. The Dusty Booze, very cool. In search of vintage spirits. So I'm looking forward to our conversation tonight. Before we jump into that, we were talking about what we're going to drink.
And, unfortunately, I don't have a large collection. I don't have any collection of Dusties. It's a sad commentary. I wish I did. I've been fortunate enough to have some delicious older, bourbons in my case and rye whiskeys, but don't have any myself. I just, the money involved with it is just a little bit more than what I'm, comfortable doing, Aaron. So we picked a few things. We talked and picked a couple things that I think are kind of throwbacks. The first one I picked, this is the Michter's 10. Michter's to me, just, I don't know, it's kind of especially with their rye. I mean, maybe not the bourbon so much, but their rye whiskey kind of is a throwback to their history that they have. But this is the 10-year-old bourbon. This is actually the 2024. This one comes in at 94.4 proof. They just sent that to me. So definitely wanted to try it. I'm always a big fan of the Michter's stuff. So I wanted to give that a shout out here on the show. So Matt, I'm going to do what I always do. I'm going to throw it over to you. I'm going to ask you, what do you pick up on the nose on this one?
It's got kind of a big, almost like beefy sort of nose. Like there's a lot of those like cracked corn, kettle corn, just like caramel corn type notes, but it has sort of this like salty salinity, like kind of like beefy, meaty nose to it as well. Kind of a weird thing to say with it, but really nice. The age, I think this at 10 years old, it comes through on the nose. There's definitely a good bit of the oak, good bit of the barrel playing some influence in there. Good age with it as well. It's not overdone with the oak, but at the same time, the age is showing through and almost just like this velvety, smooth, and really rich nose.
Yeah, it's a 10-year. It's stated 10-year. Of course, that means the youngest whiskey in there is 10 years. So Michter's is notorious, I think, at times for putting in some of their older bourbons as well. Mm-hmm. So you never know. It could be 12 or 14 years that, some of it in there. I just don't know. But Matt, I agree. It's kind of, I agree that caramel corn, the corn aroma, but then you talked about salinity. You're talking about meaty and beefy, which sounded kind of weird. But there is almost like a salinity to this. And it's not off-putting. I don't mean it in that way, but it's just different. It's something I wouldn't have expected. Still get some nice dark, like stone fruit types of aroma as well off of this. Of course, you got the neck pour, Matt. So
you ruined it. Ruined me for the night.
Oh man, Aaron, what about you? Anything else you pick up on yours on this 10?
Yeah, definitely those caramel corn notes. I can't help but get some like red fruits, cherry, maybe even a little apple actually.
Yeah,
it's nice. It's velvety's a great descriptor. It's at a real sweet spot of age.
Yeah, and I've always been, now this is the one, before I go back into that, but wasn't the 10-year-old bourbon, Matt? Wasn't it the one they did not release this like 2 years ago? Was it? Oh. Was it the 10-year-old bourbon that they withheld because they were anticipated to release it and they were like, it's just not up to our standards?
That sounds accurate. Yes.
I'm thinking it was like 2 or 3 years ago that they did not release the 10-year bourbon, kind of much to the surprise of everybody. But that's the one thing I like about Michter's. They are small, but they put out great products. Mm-hmm. And they're focused on hyper focused on quality, and Dan and Andrea do a great job up there, and they're not gonna put something out if it doesn't meet their requirements and their standards, which was really unique in this industry. I think sometimes there's just such a push to put things out, but they aren't like that. So yeah, man. So definitely a winner for me on the nose. I haven't tasted it yet. I'm looking to get into that one. So Aaron, let's talk a little bit about you. We always like to start the show out. You're a writer, so now you get to go off script a little bit and talk about yourself rather than writing about some other topic. So can you share with us a little bit about yourself, kind of talk about your background, your education, and how you got into writing?
Yeah, I went to film school at Syracuse. I wanted to be a screenwriter.
Okay.
I kind of kicked around New York in the early aughts, not getting movies made. That was a great time to be in New York for a drinker, though, because craft beer was about to boom. The bourbon renaissance. New York City was the epicenter of the cocktail renaissance, too. I had no money, but luckily I had friends who had picked smarter careers than aspiring screenwriter. and some who even had expense accounts. So, I remember, trying a lot of great stuff very early, both cocktail wise and, some of the great bourbons just as they were kind of hitting the market, the earliest BTAC and Pappy and Willet before these were at outrageous prices. I mean, $75 a bottle was outrageous to me back then. I didn't have that money, but that was back when, people that did have a little money could easily find them and afford them. I started, as the aughts were finishing, a lot of publications, especially men's publications like Esquire, started realizing they needed more committed writers on the subject of drinking. Esquire had always had drink writers, and David Wondrich was writing about cocktails for them, but they really had no one covering, craft beer and what was going on with whiskey and kind of, what younger people were drinking. And I just happened to be someone who could write a little bit and knew about a lot of this stuff going on. And I was very cheap if you wanted to hire me to write articles back then, which I think was a big selling point. I think my first article for Esquire, I was paid $100. So,
wow,
big time. But I had an Esquire byline after that. I think that was about 2008, and I started saying, geez, this is pretty good. I get to drink, and I quickly learned that I could expense drinks, and I quickly learned that samples would arrive, and then I could write about them, and they might appear a day later on the internet, and I'd get paid for them. And, however many years later, 15, 16 years later, here I am.
That's really cool. I'm just curious. Are you a Mad Men fan at all? Did you watch the show?
Of course.
Okay. So you remember where Ken Cosgrove writes his article in, was it the New Yorker or the Atlantic, the tapping a maple in Vermont or whatever on a winter day? And I think he got paid $100 for that. So man, you're in good company, right? And Ken Cosgrove, of course, that was back in the mid '60s. He got $100, but
no, it's crazy when you actually see, what some of these guys were getting paid. I think Truman Capote was paid like $10,000 from Esquire for like the first chapter of In True Blood. Tom Wolfe was getting just these absolutely insane numbers, $10 a word. So even without, how money is moved, these guys were getting paid better than almost all writers were getting paid today. It's kind of amazing and sad for our current state of journalism.
So I'm just curious. So you were doing some screenwriting. Did you have things, were you actually writing on shows or movies, or did you have success with that? Or was it just one of those things you wanted to do and it just didn't quite pan out? So spirits kind of opened up for you?
Well, the crazy thing about the film industry, and this was before there were all the streaming services and 1,000 TV shows that no one watches. You could write what's called a spec script, a speculation script, and sell it. Maybe not for a lot, but maybe for $50,000 or something. And you were still nowhere closer to it ever being in theaters. So I did sell things, and I was eking out a very sad little living. But nothing ever made it on screen. Nothing ever, as far as I know, got quite close to getting on screen. And I remember, maybe around 2008 or so, I met this guy, and someone told me that guy's made $15 million in screenwriting and he's never had a movie made. And I thought, well, that, money wise, that sounded pretty good, but it also seemed kind of sad. Like, you want to write so people know about your stuff. And kind of at that point, I started looking at, ways I could express myself and it actually, be read by other people besides my agent and my mom. And, the $15 million have yet to come, though.
Yeah. So from a writing perspective, is that something you've always done? I mean, you went to film school to write, but is writing something you just kind of grew up always passionate about and wanting to do?
Yeah, I remember in first grade or second grade, I was already kind of writing these, dumb little books and stapling them together and doing the illustrations and, probably making adults read them and pretend that they were good. But, I remember entering writing contests in third grade, and, writing was something that I always enjoyed and came fairly easy to me. And it's, been a passion my whole life.
Yeah, that's really cool. So as you're in New York, then did you have other friends that were in the industry of writing for other publications and things? What was it that actually got you into writing about spirits at that time?
Well, it kind of just fell in my lap. I honestly didn't have a lot of friends in the writing business. I had a writing partner that I wrote screenplays with his name was Tim Kalpin. And he, one day he said, I'm going to move to LA. And he moved to LA and he immediately sold a script that actually got made. And I was like, God damn, son of a. No, the Esquire gig really just fell in my lap. I had a friend of a friend, and he introduced me to this guy, Mike Michter, who was their editor. Said, Aaron knows a lot about craft beer and cocktails. I know you're looking for someone to write about it. And I barely even understood how journalism worked back then. He would say, like, I need a better lead, or I need this nut graph improved, and I'd have to Google what what the terminology meant. I really had no idea. I think it took me about 5 years of actually being employed to actually figure out how journalism worked. And maybe I don't even know now, but it was kind of an accidental profession. But that's the case for lots of people. A lot of people kind of go this odd track, especially in booze writing, which is, not something they told us was a job back in the 90s when I was in school.
Yeah, no doubt about that. So were you always into booze itself? I mean, not always, but I mean, is that something you said you were craft beer, kind of into that, and talked about the cocktail culture as well there in New York, that kind of the epicenter of that growth and expansion. But have you always had a passion for booze in general, outside of writing, that something you enjoy?
Yeah, well, I remember in college, and Syracuse is a bit of a party school, and I was like, drinking's great, getting buzzed is pretty cool, but there's got to be something better than Milwaukee's Best and whatever terrible vodkas that we're drinking. So even in college, people probably kind of looked at me as like a pretentious like a-hole, because I was always kind of like, I didn't have much money then, but what's this what's this Boston lager at the bar, what's this whiskey? And I even back then I was trying things besides the general cheapest economical thing everyone else was drinking. I didn't leave school knowing any more than just about anyone else, but getting to New York really kind of supercharged my knowledge of things.
Yeah. So, I mean, and you got the Esquire gig writing for them, but you write for quite a few different people, right? I mean, you've written quite a bit. You've got a couple other books out. Can you talk a little bit about who and all you've written for, and your other books that you have as well?
Yeah. So I've never been a staff writer anywhere. Staff writer is kind of not even a job that exactly exists. There's probably less than 10 full-time booze staff writers in America. So I've been freelance this whole time, which is kind of great because it's highest bidder takes your story. I am Vine Pair's writer at large right now, and I write a good chunk of stories for them. But I've written for just about everyone over the years: New York Times, Wall Street Journal, Whiskey Advocate, Playboy, you name it. And as you said, I think I've written 6 booze books. A lot of people in the bourbon game are probably aware of Hacking Whiskey, which I wrote in 2018, talking about the crazier things people were doing back then, which probably aren't that crazy these days. Infinity bottles, smoked cocktails, homemade blends, stuff like that. I still have people come up to me and talk about how they do things in the book, and some of the things I can't even remember. I go, that was in the book? Okay, I really don't remember. Yeah, and my second to most recent book was Brand Mysticism, which I co-wrote with this guy Stephen Grass, who is the creator of Hendrick's Gin, Sailor Jerry Rum. He revived Narragansett Lager. He's turned High Life popular again. He's really just a wizard of if you've drank something or noticed something cool in the alcohol game of the last 20 years, there's a good chance he's had his finger in that pie.
Yeah, I mean that's really cool. And so let's jump back to the whiskey, because believe it or not, we're almost at the end of round 1, Aaron. I mean, it's kind of crazy how fast time flies when we're having a conversation. But Matt, what do you pick up in terms of the palate and the finish on this Michter's 10-year bourbon?
I've got to interject real quick and say, Aaron, the fact that you believe, like you think you wrote 6 books, that's impressive, because I can tell you for a fact, if I wrote 6 emails in like this year so far, I would remember each and every single one of them. So yeah.
Yeah. He's
Well, some of them you don't want to remember. I'm not like Michter's that I always deliver something to the highest standard.
Yeah. Count those royalty checks over there. They're stacked up like Chevy Chase and all his $70,000 checks, right? You got them over there.
Yeah.
Nice. So Matt, what do you get, man?
Palate on this, it starts out to me, I pick up like a dry black cherry note. There's definitely some cherry, definitely barrel influence as well. Oak on it, but not overly oaked. I think it is a touch drying. There is a little bit of like spice and pepper, honey on it as well. But a really warm finish, a lot of peppercorn notes, and really it's like it hits me top of the tongue, top of the palate, almost like a cooling menthol type effect, just like really long heat on the finish. I think it's really good. I think it's a little thin on the palate, though, I have to say.
Gotcha.
Anyway, I'll leave it there.
Yeah, no, that's what this is about, man. Giving a review. You know, it's funny because I detected almost like a hint of clove when I first tasted this. I think it's kind of dissipated now that it's set in the glass for a while. But that peppercorn does come through, like you said, Matt. I can't remember. I know their mash bill's undisclosed. But I don't know if I know Dan would never tell us what the mash bill was. I know he hints around sometimes, but I can't remember what the mash bill, Matt. Do you have any recollection or any? Yeah. So I'm guessing maybe higher than a 18% rye in this, but I don't know for sure. But there is that peppercorn that you talk about, Matt. It is, to me, it is a little drying as well on that finish. And that clove, now that I'm talking, it's almost like it's on the very back end, just kind of lingering there in the back. Because I'm not a fan of clove. So anytime I detect clove, it's like, it just stands out to me. But I mean, overall, I'd like this, but it's not, I would not say this is probably my favorite Michter's 10 that I've had. So, Aaron, what about you? Anything you pick up in terms of the palate and the finish on this one that stands out for you?
Yeah, I definitely get some herbal notes too, which makes me wonder on the rye influence. Yeah, that finish just disappears very quickly. Completely makes you forget what you've just enjoyed. It's gone from kind of a beefy nose to just falling out quickly. But I enjoy it. It's it's a nice way to start.
Yeah, but it is kind of strange, and I agree, because usually, with Michter stuff, you get that across the board. Like you get this nice nose, it translates well into that palate, and it continues into that finish. But I agree. I think this one, Matt, you said it kind of falls flat for you on the palate, and I think you're right. It does a little bit. So it's not consistent to me across the board from nose to palate to finish.
I think that's fair.
Is that a fair? And I don't know I'm not sure what the MSRP, but I'm thinking these are probably close to like 180, maybe something like that. I can't remember, but I know they're pretty high up there. So I mean, it's a big investment for somebody to buy, but I'm always a big fan of Michter's, and but this one is not. Probably I would not say this is not my favorite Michter's 10-year bourbon that I've ever had. So, well, guys, believe it or not, we're already at the end of round 1. So let's take a quick break. We'll get a word from our sponsors, and we'll be back with more with Aaron Goldfarb, the author of Dusty Booze, in just a minute.
The Stave Restaurant is a bourbon lover's paradise right here in the heart of bourbon country. Located at 5711 McCracken Pike in Millville, Kentucky, between Castle and Key and Woodford Reserve, Chef Kyle Klatka prepares amazing food each day that features an elevated Kentucky-inspired cuisine. With a full-service bar, great bourbon flights, and signature cocktails, the Stave is the perfect place to catch up with friends after a fun-filled day of touring the local distilleries. Be sure to check them out online at thestavekentucky.com or at Instagram and Facebook at The Stave Kentucky. Three Chords line of whiskeys embody the spirit of creativity. The whiskey is a true collaboration between producer and composer Neil Giraldo and master blender distiller Ari Sussman. The Three Chord team of expert blenders, coopers, and sensory professionals have developed a multi-step process they call Perfectly Tuned Taste. This process begins by carefully selecting the finest bourbon and rye whiskeys from Kentucky, Tennessee, and Indiana, and then blending them together. Find out more about the whiskeys and distribution in your area at www.threechordbourbon.com.
All right, everybody, welcome back for round 2 of the Bourbon Life Podcast. I'm your host, Mark, and with me here tonight, live in the Bourbon Life Studios, otherwise known as my basement, it is my good friend, Matt. Matt, how are you doing out there, buddy?
Hey, I'm great out here. It's good to be back in the basement for another episode of the Bourbon Life Podcast. How are things in there in the computer room? Mission control, right?
Man. I got it. Got the blue light on. Nice. You know, man. It's all lit up in here. It's a good time
in there. I see.
Yeah, Bristol. What is it? Ship shape and Bristol fashion. Yeah, that's where we are. So, getting to that point, man. But we're having a good time tonight, man. This is a fun show. It's a little different for us, but yeah, I've been looking forward to doing this show. So we're having a good time, having a great conversation. So looking forward to this next pour because I've not done this one yet either. Actually, I hadn't even opened the bottle on this one yet until tonight.
Oh, what a treat.
Yeah, big time treat, right?
So
but we are the Bourbon Life Podcast. Oh, what was that, Matt?
Getting the neck pour.
You get the neck pour. Oh, man, don't even start. Anyway, so we are the Bourbon Life Podcast presented by Liquor Barn. We appreciate their support, all the support of all of our sponsors. Couldn't do the show without them. So thank you all for that. Matt, with that said, would you like to tell everybody who we have with us tonight?
Absolutely. Joining us tonight, joining you all this morning, this afternoon, this evening, whenever it is you are getting your Bourbon Life Podcast, is the author of Dusty Booze and possibly 5 or 6 other books on booze and alcohol, Aaron Goldfarb. Aaron, welcome on back to the Bourbon Life Podcast.
Thank you. I might have written another book while you were talking, so that's
fine. I can reassure everybody I did not write another email this year, so I'm still at maybe 6.
Here we go. Now Aaron's up to 7 now. In that little break there, he knocked one out, man. Well done. All right, so this round we're moving on. Like I said, this is one I've not cracked. I got this at the distillery not too long ago at Beam. This is the A Overholt. This is a new release. This is the Monongahela mash. So I'm really, excited because it seems like Beam's really embracing this Overholt thing. They just put out that cask strength not too long ago. They've got this new A Overholt. So I'm really happy to see that they're doing that with the rye and, putting out some different expressions.
And the cask strength, was that
Overholt.
a 10 or 11 year? I think it was a 10 year.
I think it's a 10 year. I think the bottle's in there. We can check it in the break because I got a bottle in there as well. But yeah, so this is the Monongahela mash. So this is 80% rye, 20% malted barley, no corn in this at all. This is, I believe it's only 4 years old, but again, I think it was $39, $40 retail. So, obviously a decent price. The proof, I believe it's 95. Yeah, 95 proof. So yeah, I'm kind of looking forward to getting into this one. Matt, have you had a chance to nose on this one yet?
Well, first off, Mark, why did you pick this one?
Why did I pick this one? Well, because Matt, I just feel like it's, it's a throwback. We're talking about dusty booze, and obviously this really isn't a dusty booze, but I think it pays homage to Overholt Rye, which is an older brand, been around for quite some time. And they threw it back to this Pennsylvania. Well, I guess, is that considered Pennsylvania, Monongahela?
Yeah.
Matt, do you know?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So, and it is the Monongahela, Matt, just so you know. Anyway, but yeah, so I just thought kind of a throwback whiskey. A Overholt. This was, I think the bottle says established 1810. So yeah, kind of a throwback, paying homage to the Overholt brand, the old style rye whiskey. So I just thought it'd be kind of fun to throw that on here since we're talking about dusty booze on this round. So did that answer your question?
Absolutely. And I will answer your question here and talk a little bit about the nose. This nose is absolutely delightful. It is nice and bright. It's got the good rye spices coming across. I pick up like mint, the herbal side of rye. Think mint, spearmint, almost like a little bit of like parsley or cilantro, just like really bright, fresh bouquet of herbs on the nose. But then it really leads to sort of this sweet, creamy note, almost like whipped cream or like a mint taffy type nose with it as well. And I know there's no corn in this, but I think that higher barley malt in there, kind of playing with that rye, sort of leads to almost like that cracked corn, like grain corn kind of finish on the end of the nose. even though I know there's no corn in it, but it just has this, it's just like a little bit of like a natural flavor or note on the end that to me kind of plays sort of cracked corn note, but just really nice, really, really lovely nose.
Yeah, Matt, I like your comment about the spices. I was picking up initially almost like a crisp apple type of nose on this. Very light, very, very fragrant. That's dissipated, I think, just a little bit. Maybe a little honey as well, possibly on this. But yeah, overall, really like this. And again, this is $40, 4-year-old, so it's not a super old whiskey by any means, 80-20. So, Aaron, what do you pick up on the nose? Anything you want to add to that?
No, I mean, like you guys said, it's just extremely, just bursting with herbalness, a lot of spice. I mean, that rye is just exploding. I get a little maybe breadiness, sourdough maybe. It's, for something not that high proof, it's just really aromatic. Sometimes these, lower proof, if we're going to consider this lower proof, you get almost no nose, but there's so much going on with this.
Yeah. See, now after our first round, though, I'm a little cautious about moving on later to the palate and the finish on this one. So we'll have to hold off on that for just a few minutes. But Aaron, let's talk about the book, Dusty Booze. Tell us about the book just in general. What was it that made you decide that this was a topic that you wanted to tackle and write a book about?
Yeah, I've been writing about vintage spirits for a very long time. I never became a dusty hunter per se. If you don't know what that is, that's someone who goes around to liquor stores off the beaten path, goes to estate sales, tries to find old bottles. But in the early 2010s, I started meeting guys that were doing this, and it was all guys driving around Los Angeles, driving around Baltimore, Pennsylvania, just going to every single liquor store. And this was. I said earlier that I recall a time when I could drink BTAC and Pappy for cheap. Around 2012 was when these bottles finally started kind of, hitting the mainstream and people started going, what's Pappy? And, bottles started going up in price. So I was very intrigued that these dusty hunters were going around and kind of finding Pappy before Pappy, Stitzel Weller, which, a lot of them, and myself included, thought, was better than what was being sold for more than these bottles could be found for. And when you find an old bottle, it's history in a glass. It doesn't just taste like it would have tasted if Don Draper had opened that bottle in 1960, but it teaches you a little bit about how our world has changed. You find an old Overholt from a past and you go, oh geez, this apparently used to be made in Pennsylvania. Old Overholt's maybe the most significant brand in American history. You find an old Weller or old Fitzgerald and you go, what was this Stitzel Weller and why does it no longer exist? Why was Old Granddad owned by this brand, National Distilling, and why is it so much better than it tastes today? So that really kind of captured my imagination, and I wrote, tons of articles over the last 10 years about vintage spirits collecting, and none of them did big numbers or anything necessarily, but in 2020 I wrote a story for the New York Times about this big time vintage collector, Kevin Langdon Ackerman, who found the great director Cecil B. DeMille's liquor collection just north of Los Angeles at his old estate. Perhaps a multi-$100,000 collection of bottles from the 1940s that he would have used to throw parties for Charlie Chaplin and Charlton Heston and whoever came to his house. Now that article did very well in the New York Times, and kind of publishers came to me and said, do you think you can turn this into an entire book? And I said, well, I've already written 5. I don't know if I have a 6th in me, but I think I can do it. And at the same time, Kevin was telling me that he had an even bigger celebrities collection he was pursuing. And I sold the book without knowing who that celebrity was, but I would eventually learn that was Howard Hughes, the eccentric billionaire. So that's kind of the through line of the book, is Kevin's hunt for the Howard Hughes collection. But the book drops in and out with other collectors, other hunters, it doesn't just look at bourbon either. It looks at, vintage rum collectors and why that matters, vintage tequila collectors, chartreuse collectors, etc. So if you have any interest in spirits history, distilling history, or, just why people care about these bottles, there's a little bit of everything for you in the book.
Okay, so I'm going to ask you this because I'm on a page on Facebook. It's a Dusty, and I enjoy.
I'm probably
looking.
on there too. Yeah.
I enjoy looking. I will never be buying, most likely, unfortunately, maybe one of these days. But chartreuse, you mentioned that, man. I mean, it's like I had no clue, and then it's like all of a sudden I see all these old chartreuse bottles. What's the deal with that? I mean, I really don't know anything about it.
So people who like chartreuse love chartreuse, and I'm one of those people. So,
okay,
all
right.
Try some modern chartreuse if you've never had it, and you might think it's the most repellent thing you've ever had in your life, or you might immediately be captivated by it. Mm-hmm. But so the interesting thing with vintage chartreuse, unlike vintage tequila, rum, bourbon, scotch, is chartreuse actually changes in the bottle because, it's a high proof, sugary liqueur. So, botanicals elevate, botanicals fade. I find the sugar kind of crystallizes like rock candy in the bottle. But, vintage chartreuse is really, a one of a kind experience. And it's arguable that the first ever vintage collectors, and we're talking like 1950s New Yorkers, were collecting chartreuse, vintage chartreuse. No one was collecting vintage bourbon until very recently. But even from an early age, people were captivated by chartreuse and wanted to build verticals of it, and understood that, to taste chartreuse through many years and generations was an extraordinary experience. And now vintage chartreuse is probably, the second or third most collected and expensive vintage after bourbon and maybe single malt.
Okay. Well, thanks for that explanation. Cause like I said, I've seen bottles of chartreuse and I'm like, why, what? It's like, Tom Hanks in the movie Big, it's like, I don't get it. I mean, like, I don't understand, but now I get it. So thank you for that explanation. So I'm just kind of curious here, you're going through this book, you talk about kind of got a main storyline that follows, but you talk to other collectors as well. While you were doing this, I mean, was it difficult I did read the intro and you were talking about, talking to Kevin, I think initially, and he's like kind of hesitant to talk to you about things. I mean, did you find that was kind of the mindset of most of these guys, at least in the beginning, that they're like, I don't know if I really want to talk to you about what I'm doing here? Well,
yes and no. A lot of these people know me because, I've been writing for a long time. I've been on these Facebook groups for a long time. I've been, on Instagram for a long time. But at the same time, and vintage collectors are very generous. If you're in a room with them, they're more than happy to, pour you their $10,000 bottle of something. But at the same time, if they're on the hunt for something rare, they don't want someone else to perhaps know that this old lady in the country apparently has a basement full of Stitzel Weller bottles because they've been scooped before by someone else. So there's that hesitancy, and there's also the hesitancy of there's a gray area about the legalities, not just
right.
Sure. Bottles changing hands, reporting to the IRS, flammable objects in your house, whatever the case. So, a lot of people are a little hesitant. Having said that, I don't think there's anyone out there that I wanted to talk to that didn't talk to me. A lot said thanks, but no thanks. And then a few days later, they said, you know what, I will talk to you actually. Because everyone likes to be in a book.
Sure. Yeah, no doubt. If you ever want to write a book about podcasts, let me know, Aaron. Matt
You're
and I
next.
We're in.
You're next.
You can
You're
knock
next.
that out in 15. On the next break, you could just knock that out really quick, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So going back to the bourbon, since obviously, we're the Bourbon Life, so that's kind of what we focus on more than anything else. We're talking about back in the early 2010s, bourbon started coming back in popularity. Is that when you really started seeing the rise as well in terms of the collectability, people really going out and starting to really search for it then as well?
Yeah, I usually put like 2012 as kind of the demarcation period. That's when Pappy appeared on Anthony Bourdain's show. That's when a lot of articles started coming out about the rarity of it. And that, it's kind of hard to pinpoint if there was one particular incident, but 2012 was just the year when it seemed a lot of things started happening. And Pappy and on its coattails, Buffalo Trace Antique Collection kind of got elevated from something only kind of the cognoscenti knew about to, more mainstream people who might, read Esquire or, GQ or whatever.
Yeah.
I think that's also the year Facebook groups get launched, which coincidentally becomes the secondary marketplace that everyone starts using as well. I'm not actually sure where bottles were being sold before then. Craigslist and eBay, because 2012 was also the year eBay outlawed alcohol sales.
Was it? Okay. Yeah.
So a lot of people that were very early on eBay when it was legal, cleaned out eBay of bottles that people were just posting and didn't know had much value. But a lot of things were happening around 2012, and that's kind of when everything changed, in my opinion.
Yeah. So I'm just curious, with these people, Aaron, these collectors, are they just collectors or are they drinkers as well? Or, I mean, is it kind of a mix of the two?
Well, I think the original collectors, certainly the vintage collectors, were all drinkers because, if you were getting an old granddad National Distillers in, 2010, if you were finding it for $5 in a liquor store, maybe you could sell it for $20, but it wasn't
right.
$500. These people wanted these bottles because they thought they tasted unbelievable. And, this guy, Brad Bonds, who owns Revival, a vintage shop in northern Kentucky, I think he says something in my book like, I've drank $5 million worth of vintage bourbon. Because all these people were just, they loved this stuff and they were just treating it as like their daily drinkers. Because, in some cases, like this guy, Mike Jasinski, who's the Bourbon Turtle on Instagram, he might have found 500 bottles of 1960s old granddad in one hunt and bought it all for $300. So he could afford to treat it as his daily drinker.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of instances of that. Today, however, like anything that becomes valuable, you have kind of the cynical collectors. I think it's in the book, but I've definitely written about this guy who is a teetotaler. He doesn't drink, and he buys about $500,000 worth of bourbon per year.
I did see that. I did see that reference in your book. I was like, what?
Yeah. There's not as many cynical collectors, but even people that got in it to be a drinker and not a cynical collector, at a certain point you go, well, Red Hook Rye is a great example. A lot of people bought it for $90 when it came out. If they didn't open it, maybe it's a $60,000 bottle now. Does it make them a bad person if they're, I'm going to give that to an auction house. I don't really care to drink it anymore. At a certain point, what is something worth drinking and what is, worth paying off your mortgage?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I'm just curious. I didn't ask you this earlier. I should have, but on your journey here through your writings and writing this book as well, have you become a collector yourself? I mean, do you go out and search or hunt for it?
I've never done like the hunting. I'm married and have young kids, so I'm not allowed to drive around.
That's enough said right there, Aaron. You don't even have to go any further, man. We get it.
But I love to drink vintage spirits. I love when I'm in Louisville and can go to Neat and Justin's. Yeah. I got a vintage event in Washington, D.C. tomorrow at the Fountain Inn, and we're going to be drinking vintage Negronis. I collect it when I can. I like to buy birth year bottles, which is 1979 for me. So if I see one come up or I stumble upon one for a decent price, I like to pick it up. I think it's fun to drink a birth year bottle on your birthday. But, I don't hunt too hard. I check the Facebook groups. I go on the auction sites just to see if there are any deals, but I don't, put up the kids' college funds for a bottle from the 60s.
Oh, yeah. Well, guys, we're at the end of round 2 here, but let's jump back and talk about this whiskey, the A. Overholt Monongahela Rye. Matt, what do you pick up in terms of the palate and the finish on this?
Nice grassy palate to it. Good rye spice, the herbs, the mint. come across on the palate. Like I said, kind of that grassy note. I think you can tell that it's not as old. I think you said it was 4 years, Mark, and I believe I like that. Yeah. I like that out of this product, that some of those younger notes from the rye, that you still get a little bit of distillate with it. It's not as much barrel influence where those barrel notes are taking over. So still kind of young, playful, bright rye spice, a little bit of baking spice in there, some heat on the finish as well. I think at 95 proof, I think it drinks a good little bit warmer than that, in my opinion. But at $40, this is some good sipping rye.
Yeah, I was going to say, Matt, it's funny because I was just going to say, 95 proof, it doesn't drink like 95 proof to me. It's like I can sip on it and I'm like, okay, is this really 95 proof? Because it didn't hit my palate as 95. It hit lower to me. But I do agree that rye spice comes through on the palate. But in terms of the proof point, it drinks lower than that. But man, just a good combination of spices, grassiness, like you said, very young, but not young in a bad way. I really like it. There's, not much else to say other than really good. At $40, yeah, this would be one I'd put on my bar and have it regularly. So, Aaron, what about you? Anything you want to add on that?
Yeah, I like the vibrancy of young rye, the kind of aggressiveness of it. It's kind of green and earthy to me, a little kind of minerality, kind of some dirtiness that I like to it. It's nice, the proof, the heft of it, and I do admire that Jim Beam's making it a product everyone should be able to find and afford in a nice bottle too. So,
yeah, definitely agree with that. And the bottle is, it's a really cool shaped bottle. I don't know if I held it up or not, but I like the shape of it. It's obviously a throwback. It looks like an old, like a really old bottle, established 1810. So. Very cool. Hopefully you guys can pick that up. Like I said, $40 retail. So yeah. I would definitely pick up a bottle or two of that just to have. So, guys, we are at the end of round 2. So let's take a quick break. We'll get a word from our sponsors and we'll be back with more with Aaron Goldfarb, the author of Dusty Booze, in just a minute. Bluegrass Distillers is a craft distillery with a passion for producing exceptional bourbon. They're committed to the art of distillation, using locally sourced grains to create a distinct and flavorful bourbon that captures the essence of Kentucky's rich whiskey heritage. Bluegrass Distillers takes pride in their small batch, hands-on approach, ensuring quality and attention to detail in every bottle they make, like their limited release 9-year-old Elkwood Reserve Bourbon, which is currently available for purchase at their brand new Visitor Center in Midway, Kentucky, their distillery in Lexington, and select stores throughout Kentucky. And with their new distillery slated to begin operation in spring of 2024, you'll be able to pick up even more exceptional spirits from them, like their wheated bourbon and their blue corn bourbon in the spring and fall. For more details and to plan your visit, check out their website at bluegrassdistillers.com. James E. Pepper Barrel Proof Decanter Bourbon, distilled at the historic Pepper Distillery, DSP KY5 in Lexington, Kentucky. This new release, bottled in a striking recreated distillery decanter from the 1940s, has garnered high praise and accolades. Coming in at number 27 on Fred Minnick's Top 100 Whiskeys of 2023, it received a 94-point rating and was called absolutely delicious with notes of delicate hazelnut and toffee. Astor Wines, one of New York's most prestigious retailers, writes, "The whiskeys coming of age now are some of the finest from any American whiskey producer. This bourbon is arguably the most impressive you will find at this age. Available nationwide with a suggested retail price of $65. Learn more at jamesepepper.com. All right, everybody, welcome back for the third and sadly final round of the Bourbon Life Podcast. I'm your host, Mark, and with me here tonight live in the Bourbon Life studios, it is my good friend, Matt. Matt, how are you doing out there this evening?
Mark, I'm doing great out here this evening for us, this whatever time of day it is for you, our listeners. How are you doing in there?
Man, I'm doing great, man. 2 rounds down, enjoying some great, not really dusty booze, but sort of, we're just going to stretch it out. Yeah. Sort of kind of dusty.
No, you put together a great little tasting panel for us here, a great little selection with a purpose.
Yeah, well, thanks, Matt. I appreciate that very much. So excited for this one because Aaron has not had this one, our guest, I should say. Damn it, I gave it away. Now everybody knows who our guest is, but our guest has not had this pour yet, so I'm excited to have him try this. But we are the Bourbon Life Podcast presented by Liquor Barn. We appreciate their support. We appreciate the support of all of our sponsors, everything they do for us. we couldn't do the show without their help. So thank you guys so much for all that. Matt, with that said, let's just jump right into it, man. You want to tell everybody who we have with us today?
Absolutely. Back for the third and final round here of our Bourbon Life podcast is Aaron Goldfarb, the author of Dusty Booze. Aaron, welcome on back to the show.
Thanks. I always like to imagine someone's jogging while listening to this and they're getting thirsty and then they just quit doing their run to go drink. So,
Matt, you do that all the time, don't you?
Yeah.
Just screw it.
Screw it.
I'm not going to run 18 miles today. I'm just going to go drink bourbon
I'm just gonna
instead.
go get day drunk.
Hey, Matt, what do you always tell me?
Can't drink all day if you
can't
don't
drink all
start
day
in
if
the
you don't-
morning.
There you go. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. All right. So this round, again, kind of a throwback for us. This is the James E. Pepper Decanter Barrel Proof. This is from James E. Pepper Distillery here in Lexington. We're big fans of Amir, man. We just love him. And this release came out last year. And man, we got it at, I guess it was Bourbon on the Banks, right, Matt? Was that where we tried it for the first time? Back in October over in Frankfurt. Man, just crazy how good this was. The end of the year, I think probably 3 or 4 of us had this listed as one of the best bourbons of the year for each of us. I think, Matt, if I remember correctly, I know I did. I think Chad did as well. So big fans. This one comes in at 105.4 proof. And if I remember correctly, I think Amir said this is right around 5.5 years old. So it's not really that old of a bourbon. But man, it's something else. I don't want to give it away yet, but we have reviewed this on the show before, but Aaron, I'm excited for you to get to try it.
this is
with
their
us as well.
This is their distillate. I know they were sourcing for a while. Is this?
Yep, this is all theirs. This is
their juice.
Some of their older stock. I know I was just there this last week talking to the head distiller. He'll never call himself master, but head distiller Cody Giles, and he was saying that more or less all of their first and original stock is now being allocated towards this product. Had they known that they were going to come out with this and it was going to be so successful 3-4 years ago, they would have started laying down a whole lot more than they did.
Cool.
Yeah, they've done a really good job with this. So Matt, what do you pick up on this one in terms of the nose?
It's got a really big nose that hits on a lot of different places. I think right up front, I get some pepper, like a waft of the rye coming through, a little bit of peppercorn, but the nice bourbon notes, that corn really comes through. There's that caramel corn, kind of that like Cracker Jack note that we've sort of been playing around with all evening and that I often pick up on an older product. But there's also good like orchard fruit with this, good plum, like a little bit of fig or almost raisin note as well. Just a sweetness that also plays with like this really oaky, nice, almost like smoky charred note as well. This is just a nose that it really hits to me on like all fronts. It brings out the rye spice, brings out bold bourbon flavors. There's some brightness. There's mature notes on it as well. There's barrel. It's a fine balance of everything.
Yeah. That's greatly said. That's very well said, Matt. It reminds me, you mentioned fig, and it's like, it's almost, it's like nosing a fig Newton in a glass almost. Kind of that spiciness that goes along with a fig Newton, but the sweetness, the fig aroma, plus also the kind of that bready cracker or cookie. I kind of get a little bit of that aroma as well, sweetness. But man, just overall, just absolutely love the nose on this one. And this one was, I think it's $59 or $60, 60, 65, maybe something like that. So, definitely reasonably priced. The bottle is gorgeous. I guess they call this the decanter, right, Matt? It's just the James Pepper Decanter Barrel Proof. But it's designed off of an old bottle. Amir's a big historical buff and did a lot of research. And, I think they even have, is their doubler
Yeah,
made
it's actually the same
like
shape
this?
of their doubler on there still.
Yeah, the doubler shaped exactly like the bottle, which is really, really cool. So, all right, man. So, Aaron, what else? Did you pick up anything on this in terms of the nose that stands out?
Yeah, I kind of get some like winey notes. Like I would swear it was a finished bourbon if I didn't know otherwise. Like red wine or sherry almost. It's really a nice fragrant almost.
It's a flagrant bourbon. It's 15-year penalty.
Yeah, it's nice. Definitely those orchard fruits.
So let's jump back. Yeah, for sure. So let's jump back talking about Dusty Booze, the book. This is The Search of Vintage Spirits. So I'm just kind of curious, writing the book, what would you say, what was the biggest challenge for you, Aaron, in terms of doing this and making this concept, taking it from the articles you had written, the idea of talking with other publishers about turning it into a full book? What was the biggest challenge you faced actually making that a reality?
Well, one of the biggest challenges is I rested on my laurels and thought I know everything about vintage spirits, so I'll just phone it in and write it when I have a chance. And then I got to January 1st, 2023, and I said, "Oh crap! I have like 90 days to write this thing." The real challenge though was about 100 pages in. I thought the book was going to be almost exclusively about bourbon collectors, bourbon dusty hunters, because that's who I knew. I'd never met anyone who called himself a dusty hunter that collected anything else. Maybe they'd grab stuff if they found it, but they were on the hunt for bourbon. And about 100 pages in, I started going, this is kind of getting repetitive. And I started wondering, are there, vintage rum collectors? Are there vintage tequila collectors? And the answer was yes. There's vintage water collectors. So I mean, so that the challenge for that was I knew all the bourbon guys to reach out to. That was easy, and a lot of them knew me. Yeah. But when I said to myself, I want to write a chapter on vintage tequila, I'd never met anyone in my life who collected it, and I had to find these guys. And again, I had those 90 days. Rum was a little easier. I knew a lot of rum guys. A lot of tiki bartenders inherently need to find old rum to know what classic rum cocktails from the past would have tasted like, because rum is really evolved in how it tastes. But that tequila chapter was the real, how in the hell am I going to find a vintage tequila collector? And luckily I did find some great guys, and now I'm kind of obsessed with vintage tequila myself.
Yeah, that's something I never really thought about, because I know, tequila, the movement, people are really getting into it. I'm still venturing into it somewhat, but obviously bourbon's the main focus, but becoming a bit of a tequila fan. So I'm just curious, in terms of the vintage bourbon, how big, is there really a big market for that right now? Or is that something that's growing at this point?
Vintage tequila? Or vintage?
Yeah, sorry, vintage tequila. Sorry.
Vintage tequila is, it's got as ardent of fans as any category. Probably the nicest collectors too, I will say. But because they're kind of the underdog. They are very passionate and want people to also be as passionate. And so many people that drink tequila, in their opinion, drink the wrong tequila, celebrity driven, additive flavored tequila. The interesting thing about vintage tequila is, tequila kind of enters America at a very late point. Cuervo's the first one to come in 1937, but there's not 100% agave tequila really till the 60s or 70s. And there's not a lot of it till the 80s. So whereas you can never go far enough back for vintage bourbon or rye, the bottles that are worth a lot in vintage tequila are from the 80s and 90s.
Oh, okay. Gotcha.
So very recently. Mm-hmm. And there's not a lot out there. Certainly not as lot. There's, a sea worth of vintage bourbon out there, but the vintage tequila is a little rarer, and they're probably pissed that I'm become such a fan of it, because prices have really started to soar in the last year or two. I don't think because of me, but maybe.
Yeah.
But
you're on a hit list now somewhere, right, Aaron?
It's still fairly esoteric. There's still a lot of the big whiskey collectors kind of dipping their toes into the pool of it. Vintage tequila is still what I predict will be the next kind of big category.
Good to know. Matt, let's pull our money, man, and see what we can find.
Yeah, sure thing. So Aaron, I've got a question for you.
Okay.
What is it about Dusty Booze that makes it so great? It makes it what it is. Like what is it about old National Distillers, old Granddad that we've been talking about that makes it so great? Old Stitzelweller, like just, in bourbon terms for our listeners here, since we're a bourbon centric podcast, like what is it about Dusty Booze that makes it so great?
I think one of the interesting things and why I and a lot of people are kind of drawn to vintage spirits and vintage bourbon is because there's kind of a magic and mystery to what exactly was going on. With vintage tequila, it's kind of evident what was going on. They were harvesting 12 to 14-year-old agave, and now they might be harvesting, 5-year-old. Mm-hmm. With vintage bourbon, there's any number of things. Was the corn better than the, kind of GMO commodity corn today? Right. I've heard the oak barrels were made with 175-year-old trees back then. Now perhaps 80-year-old trees. Wild Turkey used to, and other distilleries, Maker's Mark II, used to ferment in cypress tanks. You got to wonder if a certain kind of, yeast was stuck in the walls of it that gave kind of that, funk house signature. We drank Michters earlier. They go in the barrel at a very low entry proof. I think they go in at 110. Is that correct? Current Michters?
I think it's even lower than, I was thinking it's even lower than that, but maybe it is 110, Aaron. I'm not sure.
Well, yeah. Back in the day, there was no such thing as putting it in the barrel at 125.
Right. Yeah. Right.
All these guys went at a low proof. No one was drinking bourbon in the 70s, 80s, and 90s. So, there's rumors that, bottles of Wild Turkey 101 might have had 18-year-old barrels in it, Mm-hmm. So, there's all these things, and I don't think it's one or the other. I think it's all these things combined. It was just a very interesting time where no one was drinking bourbon, but more bourbon was being made than is even made today. And, I also think the fact that each distillery had their one or two releases. Wild Turkey releases like 50 products now. So if they have an incredible 18-year-old barrel, it's going to go into, Master's Keep or whatever. Back then their only choice was to kind of put it into, a 101 or maybe a Cheesy Gold Foil if that was their one special release for the year. Same with all the other brands. Maker's Mark, of course, famously didn't even produce a second SKU till, what was that, 2012 or whatever?
2012, yeah.
2012, yeah. So I think that's a critical thing no one ever thinks about. Literally the best of the best barrels had to go into their most, affordable shelf product because that was what they sold.
Mm-hmm. Yep. So Aaron, I'm just curious in terms, like I said before we started the show, I've seen you doing a couple different podcasts recently, obviously promoting the book. What's been the reception? Other than the tequila collectors that now have you on a hit list, from the bourbon community, what's been, overall reception to the book?
The reception's been great, but most books about alcohol have lots of pretty pictures and sometimes recipes in that. And to be clear, This is a book that's 400 pages of words, which is fairly unusual. Not a lot of these books come out. So,
man. There's
I don't
no
know.
Pictures?
There's no, the front, there's a picture of me in the back. That's what you get as your treat if you finish all 400 pages.
There's Aaron in the back.
I look the same. I think I'm wearing my one and only shirt.
I think you're wearing the same shirt.
I think so. The reception's been absolutely unbelievable. Doesn't always translate to sales, but all you can do is write a book and hope people like it. So once it's on the shelves, it's out of my hands. What happens?
Yeah, but that's really cool. I'm a big fan, obviously, of the creative process, and I think what you do to come up with something, you're writing these articles, you're writing something that you're interested in, that you're passionate about, and it starts becoming something more to you. So then you take that idea and you develop it and grow it into something that actually becomes something that people all around the world are able to buy and read and consume and kind of get into your head what you're thinking, man. To me, I think that's one of the coolest things you can do as an artist. As a writer, as a person, to be able to do something like that, to take a concept, take something where there was nothing before, because the book didn't exist. You created it, you made it, man. So kudos to you for doing that.
Yeah, thanks. And it's a great gift to write a book because I, in a way, get a free education. My side, not even a free education. I get paid for educating myself. 24 months ago, I knew nothing about tequila, certainly nothing about vintage tequila, and because of this book, I've become a huge nut for it. So, writing a book's a great gift, and I'll never take it for granted.
Yeah, well, that's very cool, and I like to hear that. So I'm going to ask you, how do you think the bourbon landscape's changed over the last 5 to 10 years, Aaron? And where do you see? Can you talk about where you maybe see it going in the future?
Well, I'm going to be on other people's hit list if I talk about it. Well, I always say, as I mentioned earlier, I used to write about craft beer too. Which is going through a very, very tough time. And I always like to say craft beer is kind of like on a 5-year earlier scale for showing what happens with trends for bourbon. With craft beer, you saw everyone, getting in the game for many, not for the right reasons, for cash grabs. You saw overexpansion. You saw a ridiculous amount of products. You saw silly trends. And, I kind of see all these same things happening with craft beer. It was trends of these absolutely absurd stouts loaded up with all sorts of desserty ingredients, which kind of, predicts the finishing wars that have been going on for the last several years. I don't know, there's obviously lots of great bourbon still coming out. I continue to be shocked that new places are opening. It's seemingly every day. You're certainly going to start seeing things closing. I know things are already closing. You're going to start seeing, I think, places having to scale back and not be in all 50 states. And I think I don't know where it's going to go. Yeah. I mean, people seem to be ramping down. You had a kind of glory years of 5 straight years where all these whiskey clubs could buy like 50 single barrels a year, and all their members would buy them within seconds. And now people are telling me they're really struggling to sell out, single barrels because all these bourbon bros have like 5 million bottles in their house and they don't need another damn bottle. So stuff needs to be really, really good to kind of cut through all this noise and make you want to spend $180 on a bottle, make you want to open a bottle, sip the bottle, talk about the bottle. It's going to be an interesting next decade for sure.
Yeah, very, very well said. So I'm just curious, out of all this, did you have something that a bourbon specifically that maybe you weren't aware of or that you hadn't really paid that much attention to, that through this process of writing this book that you became a big fan of now?
That's a good question. I've been lucky to drink most of the kind of famous vintage. Until I started writing the book, though, I'd never really paid attention to kind of just the kind of shelf bottles of pre-fire Heaven Hill, not even particularly old, just, early 90s and, 1980s bottles of, stuff like, what is that, Anderson Club and whatnot, which still you can buy fairly cheaply at vintage bars. I think they're just absolutely outstanding lower proof bourbons. We were talking about why stuff from the past is better. And you taste those pre-fire Heaven Hills and you're going, how is this 80 proof bourbon got a richer mouthfeel than anything I drink today? What exactly was going on back then? Was it the entry proof? Why can't this, be created these days seemingly? And I don't know.
Yeah, that's a good point. So guys, we're almost at the end of the round and the show here, but Aaron, what else do you have coming up? You got anything else? I mean, I know this book just came out not too long ago, so I'm not going to be like, hey, what's next? But hey, what's next, Aaron?
There's such a long lead time on books. You wouldn't believe how long that for the last decade, while I've been promoting one book, I've usually been working on another, but that is not occurring right now. So I'm kind of an aimless man who doesn't know what to do with himself. So I need a person to slide into my DMs and say, I got the next great story for you and I'm going to give it to you and you can write it. So for now, I'm just drifting in the wind and appearing on
Very
podcasts.
nice.
Yeah, drinking vintage
So I got to ask you,
Negronis.
what's vintage Negronis? There you go.
Vintage
There you
Negronis,
go.
yes.
So what's one thing that you hope when people read your book, Dusty Booze? Is there one specific thing or anything that you hope that people just kind of come away with from that book?
You know, I don't want to get like too philosophical. I think it is a very fun book to read, but I think when you talk about why stuff from the past is better, you have to start asking, like, what is going on today that is, you know, essentially ruining so many categories? Is it, you know, whether conglomerates or celebrity involvement or, you know, corporate greed? You know, I'm not going to get all Marxist on anyone here, but, you know, what is happening that, you know, brands are not creating the absolute best products when, you know, back in the 80s they didn't have, you know, MIT graduates in the lab. They didn't have, you know, stills operated by, you know, iPhone and whatnot. You know, these were just men, you know, cutting heads and tails by, you know, by how they thought it should be done, and they were creating incredible stuff without, you know, corporate interference from, you know, Milan or Japan or Madison Avenue. So I think if we see, you know, successes in the future, and we're starting to see it in tequila, it's going to be the brands. I think Frey Ranch is a great example that are kind of looking at doing things the old-fashioned way, high quality grains, you know, taking the time. And I know, it's very, very expensive to just sit and wait till something's great before you sell it. But they did it in the past, and I think we can do it in the future.
Yeah, and we're
easy,
we're big fans
easy
of
for me to say. I don't own anything.
We're big fans of Colby and Ashley Frey. We had them on the show, man, back when they pretty much were just kind of getting going. We got lucky, got introduced to them, and fell in love with their stuff. And just, I agree with that. They're great people, no doubt about that. So, guys, we're at the end of the round. Let's talk about the whiskey here. Matt, what do you pick up, palate and finish on this pepper Decanter Barrel Proof?
It opens with a really great sweetness that to me is like the sweetness of caramel corn or like kettle corn, almost Cracker Jack with like.
You're on a big caramel corn kick tonight,
You
aren't you,
can't
man?
talk about.
Did he go to the fair today or something?
Man, what the hell?
To me,
What'd
you
do?
can't
Did
really
get
talk
Cracker
about
Jacks?
like dusty booze or older booze, older bourbon especially. I always pick up like these Cracker Jack or like cracked corn, caramel corn notes, just like really great grain notes right off the front. And maybe it's just stuck in my mind that we're talking about older bourbon, but I'm getting some of those notes off this. But then this one transitions over into like a really crisp, almost like tartness of red fruit, which to me, I'm tasting almost like a cranberry. Think of almost like sweet Thanksgiving style cranberries with like a little bit of cinnamon and citrus, like a little bright acid note on it, but also the darkness from some sort of red fruit, something tart like the cranberry. And there's definitely barrel influence even at 5.5 years.
5.5
I know
years,
that James E. Pepper uses 18 to 24 month air dried Calvin cooperage, so they use kind of the top of the tops in barrels. So I think the barrel definitely makes its presence known on this one. Good pepper spice as well, and then a just warm, like sweet, peppery cinnamon finish to close it all out. Just a really, really great pour all the way across the board from palate to finish.
I agree, Matt. Consistency across the board, just for the pricing, $65. You know, I mean, 5.5 years old, 105 proof. Just a great pour. Aaron, anything you want to add on the palate and finish on that?
I mean, one of you said, maybe both you, it was one of your top bourbons of last year. I mean, this is incredible stuff. I can't believe I've never had it before, but it immediately hits you with that just liquidized caramel sweetness, but it's not cloying. And then it quickly gets balanced out with a nice spicy little finish. It's incredible stuff, and that price is quite good. I'd definitely get a bottle of that.
Yeah, no doubt about it. And this is going to be in their lineup, right? Once a year, Matt. Is that the plan? They're going to release it yearly.
I think it's going to be kind of. It's allocated. I know they're going to allocate it, but as it's a year-round release now.
Okay, great. Well, I know a guy, so maybe I can get some more bottles.
Yeah, right.
All right. Well, Aaron, man, we've had a great time tonight. But before we wrap it up, I just want to ask you, what's been your favorite part of this journey for you so far in all this, your writing, everything you've done? Can you pinpoint one thing that's been like the favorite part for you?
Well, I mean, everyone says it, it's the people,
Yeah,
the people,
right.
the people you get to meet, whether, people making cool things, crazy entrepreneurs who think, the world needs another bourbon brand, and then amazingly they're proven right. And, my fellow journalists, the podcasters, it's just fun to have your world opened up to so many different people with similar passions and similar interests. And, it's a great industry to just sit, drink, and talk about, right?
Yeah, for sure. So, Aaron, where can people get more information, find your book, and where can they get more information about you?
I am all over the internet. I'm a shameless self-promoter, so I'm easy to find information about me. I'm Aaron Goldfarb on Instagram. It's about the only place I'm still posting stuff. I write a few stories for VinePair per month, and I write for other spots too, Esquire and New York Times, and my book is everywhere books are sold.
Awesome.
So.
Well, congratulations on that. And like I said before, to me, it's an amazing feat to take something that's just a concept and then to turn it into something that's actually, just physical, that's there, that you can share with people, man. I think that's one of the greatest achievements you can ever do. I mean, I really do. So congratulations.
Thank you
on that, Aaron.
Thank you.
So any final thoughts before we wrap it up, though?
I don't think so. Of those 6 books, this is the first with a dust jacket, I would say. So I'm very proud.
Congratulations. That's a big step right there, man.
It is a big step. Yeah.
Yeah. Matt, any final thoughts before we close it out, man?
Hey, Aaron, thanks for taking the time to sit down with us and all of our guests, listeners here. Talk through yourself, your books, your past, and some Dusty Booze. We had a great time. We were really looking forward to this episode, and thanks. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's been a lot of fun, Aaron. Thank you so much for sitting down with us. Glad we were able to make this happen. Looking forward to finally reading your book. I'm sorry I didn't get a chance to do it beforehand.
That's all right.
But yeah, I'm looking forward to reading through the whole thing. Even though it's 400, pages, and I'm an attorney and I hate reading stuff. And there's no pictures. My pictures are usually my favorite, Aaron. But I'm gonna work through it.
There's some quick inserts that are
okay. All right.
You can. There's an audiobook too. I don't read it though. So.
Okay. Well, there you go.
Nice. David Attenborough, right?
Too. No. Yeah, David.
Yeah, I lost the gig to narrate it. Some other guy got it. So.
Oh man. Well, Aaron, we appreciate it, man. Hopefully, sometime when you're in town, because we're both here in Lexington, man. If you're here in Kentucky, let us know. We'd love to get together, man. Have some Dusty pours with you over in Louisville or up in Northern Kentucky, whatever. That'd be a lot of fun. We'd love to do that, man. So. But thank you for joining us. Thank you to our listeners for joining us as well. Like Matt always says, whatever time of day it is, morning, noon, or night, whenever it is, you get your Bourbon Life fix. We appreciate you guys taking the time to listen to us. We also appreciate all of our sponsors. Thank you, Liquor Barn, of course, our presenting sponsor. We couldn't do the show without them and all of our sponsors. If you want to reach out to us, you can do that. You can email us at thebourbonlife@gmail.com. You can also find us on Facebook and Instagram at The Bourbon Life and join our private Facebook group, The Bourbon Lifers. We have some fun conversations and things going on in there. If you feel so inclined, please leave us a review, a positive review only, on your favorite podcasting platform. With that said, I'm going to wrap it up. Send us on with our tagline, which is, may your glasses always be full, and may you keep on living the bourbon life.
Thank you for joining us for this week's episode of the Bourbon Life Podcast. Our mission at the Bourbon Life is simple: to share our passion for all things bourbon with you every week. And we'd really love to hear your thoughts on how we're doing. You can find us on Instagram and Facebook at The Bourbon Life. You can also contact us by email at thebourbonlife@gmail.com. And you can always find us on your favorite podcast platform. If you have a moment, we'd love it if you would rate us and give us a review. So until next week, we hope your glass is always full and that you keep on living the Bourbon Life.
Welcome to the kitchen table at James B. Beam Distilling Company, where every visit is a celebration of tradition and flavor. Did you know that the kitchen table is nestled right within the heart of the distillery? That's right. You can experience the essence of James B. Beam's legacy while savoring their delectable dishes. Join them every Wednesday through Sunday from 11 a.m. to 5 p.m. for a culinary journey like no other. Planning a special event? Let the kitchen table be your host, creating unforgettable memories for you and your guests. And don't miss their exclusive Behind the Beam tour and monthly Claremont Supper Club events, which will feature their 2024 Bardstown Bourbon Collection James B. Beam Distilling Company release on June 13th. For more information and reservations, visit beamdistilling.com. The kitchen table at James B. Beam Distilling Company. Come as a friend, leave as family.